Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She pushed my hand away like it was routine, like my touch was some minor inconvenience that she had to manage before moving on with her evening. She didn't even look at me when she said it. She just walked past with her laptop tucked under her arm and said she wasn't in the mood. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead. I just told her I was done begging for what should come naturally. The sentence stopped her mid-stride. Not because she disagreed, because it was the first time she'd heard me say anything she couldn't twist. It should have ended there, a cold moment in a quiet kitchen. But the shift started long before that night. It began the afternoon she bought a podcast mic from Best Buy for a work project. She set it up in the living room, adjusting levels, testing her voice, playing with tones. I thought she was just experimenting. She said PR work demanded new skills. But every time her phone buzzed, she angled the screen away, smiling at messages she never explained. When I asked how the recording went, she said she needed privacy to think. Privacy became a ritual, and rituals became distance. Then came the Target trips. Quick runs, short errands, 30 minutes, sometimes 60. She'd come back wearing those same Nike leggings, flushed like she'd been rushing, but not carrying a single bag. I noticed the timing lined up with the late shifts of one particular employee, Ethan. Quiet kid. Worked in quality control under me. I'd recommended him for advancement last year. He always seemed grateful. Too grateful, maybe. I didn't suspect anything at first. I trusted her patterns the way I trusted machines. If something broke, it would show. And it did. In small ways. In skipped dinners. In cold shoulders. In her sudden obsession with her phone. In the nights, she sat alone watching Hulu without inviting me to sit beside her. The first real fracture happened when I walked into the garage and saw her leaning against my Ford F-150, typing rapidly on her phone with a smile I hadn't seen in months. When she noticed me, that smile vanished like it had been meant for someone else entirely. That was the moment I realized I wasn't losing her. I was being excused. The truth didn't arrive in one blow. It surfaced in details only someone like me would notice. Quiet deviations in routine, tiny fractures in behavior that didn't fit the system she'd built around herself. She thought she was subtle. She forgot I spent my life reading patterns for a living. The first undeniable sign happened at work. I was walking the production floor when I saw Ethan, my junior quality tech, checking his phone with an expression that didn't belong in a workplace. Nervous, excited, distracted. He tried to hide it the second he saw me, slipping the device into his pocket like it burned. Normally, he was composed, stiff even. But that day, he could barely maintain eye contact. His shift report was rushed. His notes were sloppy. And when I signed off on his documentation, his hands were shaking. I didn't say a word. I just watched him walk away too quickly, heading toward the break area where I knew the signal was strongest. That was the first time I wondered if her quick lunches at Subway were lining up with his breaks by coincidence or by intention. The second sign waited for me at home. I walked in earlier than usual and found her sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, surrounded by an open laptop, scattered notes, and that same Best Buy microphone she claimed was for work recordings. She wasn't using it. She was rehearsing something, practicing a tone, a softer voice, the kind people use when they want to be listened to. When she noticed me, she snapped the laptop shut so sharply the mic wobbled. She said she was preparing a pitch for a client. I didn't challenge it, but when her phone vibrated on the floor beside her, she lunged for it like a lifeline. Too fast, too familiar, too guilty. That night, she watched Hulu alone on the couch while I stood in the hallway, unseen. She wasn't watching the screen. She kept checking her phone every few seconds, waiting for something or someone to respond. When I finally stepped into the room, she straightened, locking the phone instantly. She asked why I was home early, her voice tight, almost annoyed. I didn't answer her question. I just sat down across the room, silent, and watched her choke on the one thing she never expected from me. Distance. I didn't go digging for proof. It unfolded on its own, quietly, like a system revealing its weakest link under pressure. The moment that tied everything together happened on an ordinary Wednesday, the kind of day she thought I never paid attention to. I came home earlier than expected, not to catch her, just to see the house the way it behaved when I wasn't inside it. I heard her before I saw her. She was in the kitchen, speaking softly, almost whispering, her voice pitched in a way I'd only heard her use on clients she needed to impress. I stepped closer, slow enough not to alert her. She leaned against the counter in her Nike leggings, smiling down at her phone as if the world existed only in that tiny glowing rectangle. She said she had a few minutes before leaving, and that she'd swing by Subway for lunch. The phrasing wasn't intimate, but the tone was. Too light, too playful, too familiar for a casual errand. When she turned and noticed me standing there, the phone vanished behind her back like a reflex. She said she was just planning her afternoon, just grabbing a quick bite, just working through a busy week. The excuses stacked themselves neatly, too neatly, like she'd rehearsed them. I didn't challenge her. I didn't ask who she was talking to. I just nodded once and walked upstairs. When the door closed behind me, I saw her shoulders drop in the reflection of the microwave door. Relief, not guilt. Relief because she thought she'd avoided a conversation she wasn't ready to have. She left minutes later. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. An hour after she pulled out of the driveway, my phone buzzed with an automated work alert. Ethan had clocked out unexpectedly for an extended break. His location wasn't visible to me, but his pattern was. His breaks always lined up with hers these days. I drove only to clear my mind, not to chase her. When I returned, the house was empty and too quiet. Hulu was still paused from the night before, waiting for someone to hit play. She didn't. She came home 2 hours later, Subway bag half full, eyes down, cheeks flushed with a story she hadn't planned to lie about. She walked past me, stiff, guarded, expecting me to question her. I didn't say a word. Her silence told me everything she never would. The day everything crystallized wasn't dramatic. It was clean, quiet, almost procedural, the kind of shift you only notice when you stop reacting and start observing. I woke before her, dressed without turning on a single light, and left the house before she even rolled over. I didn't slam a door or sigh loudly or make any gesture meant to teach her a lesson. I just removed myself from the emotional schedule she'd kept me on for years. When she finally walked into the kitchen in her robe, I was already halfway across town, settling into a version of myself she wouldn't recognize. That morning at work, Ethan avoided me with a level of anxiety that bordered on panic. He dropped a stack of reports when he saw me walking toward the lab. Pages scattered everywhere, and he scrambled to pick them up without meeting my eyes. Normally, he'd ask me questions, linger for guidance, try to impress. That day, he finished his shift notes in under 30 seconds and practically sprinted out the door. I didn't chase him. I didn't call him into my office. I let his behavior confirm what I'd already pieced together. He wasn't afraid of losing his job. He was afraid I already knew which line he'd crossed. When I got home that evening, she was sitting on the couch with Hulu paused, the screen reflecting off her face. She looked up like she expected an argument, a demand, a breakdown, anything that proved I still fought for the spot she'd taken for granted. Instead, I hung my keys on the hook and walked past her without stopping. She stared at me like I'd turned into a stranger in my own house. She followed me into the kitchen, moving slowly, wrapped in those same Nike leggings she wore on her head-clearing drives. She asked why I'd left so early, why I hadn't answered her messages, why I was acting distant. I opened the fridge, took out a bottle of water, and closed the door softly. No anger, no interest, just stillness. She waited for me to confront her. I didn't, because confrontation would have meant I still needed something from her. And that part of me had already gone dark. My silence didn't push her away. It pulled her forward. Like gravity, she suddenly couldn't fight. Over the next few days, she tried to reassert the rhythm she once controlled. She hovered near me in the mornings, asking if I needed coffee, asking if I'd be home for dinner, asking questions she used to answer for me without waiting. I gave her nothing more than one-word replies. Not cruelty, not punishment, just space she'd never had to navigate before. The car became my refuge. Every evening after work, I sat inside it for 10, 15 minutes before walking in. Engine off, phone silent, just breathing in a world where she no longer decided the emotional temperature. When I finally entered the house, she always noticed. She'd straighten up immediately, pretending she wasn't pacing. She looked smaller, lighter, like someone unsure which version of her husband was walking through the door now. One night, I found her in the dining room, staring at her laptop. The Best Buy microphone sat beside it, unplugged, as if she didn't know whether to hide it or pretend it didn't matter. She jumped when she realized I'd walked in. She tried to explain she wasn't recording anything, that she'd paused the project, that she'd been reevaluating priorities. She said it too quickly, tripping over her own words, like she was adjusting her story in real time. I didn't ask what she was explaining. I just walked past her and set my bag down. She followed me, slower this time, her voice softer, asking if something was wrong at work, if I was stressed. She wasn't concerned about my job. She was concerned about my silence. At dinner, she took small bites, pretending to eat, checking her phone every few seconds. Not for him. He'd already started withdrawing, and she could feel it. She checked the phone to see if I noticed her discomfort. I didn't give her the validation she used to expect. I just ate, calm, measured, unbothered. When the meal was over, she asked if we could watch something on Hulu, like we used to. Her voice cracked on the used to, and she noticed it too late. I told her I had work to finish and walked into the office. She didn't follow, because for the first time, she understood the truth she never prepared for. She hadn't just lost my affection. She'd lost access to me. The social hit arrived without warning. It didn't come from gossip or confrontation. It came from the natural way people shift their tone when they sense something is off, something they can't name, but feel the edges of. And she felt every change. It started at a small Friday gathering her team held at a coworker's house. She asked me to join, her voice too bright, too hopeful, like proximity alone could fix the thing she broke. I went, not for her, but because silence travels differently when witnesses are around. When we walked in, she tried to slip her hand through the crook of my arm, a gesture she hadn't used in months. I didn't pull away. I simply didn't respond. Her hand hovered there, unsure, then dropped. Inside, conversations flowed around her, but not to her. People greeted her politely, even warmly, but there was a subtle distance, a pause before eye contact, a slight delay before replies. They weren't avoiding her. They were recalibrating, adjusting to the new tension she couldn't control. At one point, I stepped onto the patio to take a call from a vendor. Through the sliding glass door, I saw her with one of her coworkers, a woman she admired for her confidence. This coworker asked if everything was okay at home. Not intrusive, just observant. My wife laughed too quickly, brushing it off, claiming we were just busy lately. But the coworker didn't nod with understanding. She pressed her lips together, glanced toward me, and said something quiet that made my wife stiffen. I couldn't hear the words. I didn't need to. The body language said enough. Later, when sandwiches from Subway were brought out, she hovered near me again, trying to stand close enough for others to see us as united. I kept my posture neutral, my attention elsewhere. I wasn't performing distance. I simply wasn't performing connection. When someone asked how work was going for me, I answered calmly. When someone asked her how she'd been, she hesitated, because the version of herself she always presented no longer matched the reality everyone sensed. On the drive home, she sat rigid, staring out the window, as if searching for a version of the night she could rewrite. She wasn't losing her social footing. She was losing the narrative she built her identity on. Her isolation didn't explode. It tightened around her inch by inch, like a room shrinking so slowly she didn't notice until she had nowhere left to stand. And I watched it happen from 10 feet away, not with satisfaction, but with the detachment of someone who finally understood his role was no longer to rescue. She started waking earlier, pacing around the bedroom in silence, pretending to tidy things that didn't need tidying. When I came downstairs, she'd linger near the counter, waiting for me to ask how she slept, waiting for me to initiate the morning the way I always had. I didn't. I grabbed my thermos, checked the time, and walked out. She'd stand there in her Nike leggings, arms folded, watching the door close like she wasn't sure whether I'd return that night or vanish into the early morning darkness again. At work, I saw the fallout extending farther than our home. Ethan barely functioned under the pressure of her collapsing attention. He avoided the break room entirely. He clocked in early, left late, and jumped any time I walked past. He wasn't worried about consequences. I hadn't issued a single threat. He was terrified of the silence. Terrified of what it meant that I never called him into my office. Terrified that I had nothing to say. His fear mirrored hers. When I got home that evening, she was sitting at the dining table, laptop open, the Best Buy mic still unplugged beside it like a monument to her mistake. She wasn't working. She was spiraling. Her phone lay screen up on the table, untouched long enough that the display kept dimming. I noticed that. She noticed me noticing. She told the room she felt like she was disappearing inside her own life. She said everyone seemed distant lately, that even her co-workers acted different. She said it like the world was shifting unfairly around her, not realizing she had been the epicenter of the shift all along. I walked to the fridge, took a bottle of water, and sat on the far end of the couch. She followed me, steps uneven, face tight, with a type of fear I'd never seen in her. Fear of irrelevance. She wasn't isolated because I pulled away. She was isolated because she finally felt what silence feels like when no one rushes to fill it for her. The confrontation didn't happen because she was ready. It happened because she couldn't hold herself together anymore. I came home after dark, walking into a house that felt too still, too rehearsed. She was standing in the living room, not moving, not pretending to scroll, not even trying to stage confidence. Just standing there, hands clasped, breathing like someone bracing for impact. I hung my jacket on the hook and stepped past her toward the kitchen. She called my name, but it wasn't sharp. It was fragile, thin, like something fraying at the edges. When I didn't stop, she followed, slower, like her legs didn't trust her weight. She asked why I wouldn't talk to her, why I kept leaving early, why I came home late, why I sat in the car before walking in. Her voice cracked on the last question, and she tried to hide it, blinking too fast. She wasn't asking for clarity. She was asking for emotional gravity, something to grip onto so she didn't feel like the floor was slipping. I opened the fridge, took out a bottle of water, and let the silence answer instead. She stepped closer, her Nike leggings brushing softly as she moved, the same outfit she used to leave the house in when she needed air. This time she didn't pretend. She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched my forearm, not seductively, not manipulatively, but like she needed to confirm I was still human, still warm, still reachable. I didn't pull away. I didn't lean in. I didn't move at all. Her hand dropped a second later. Then came the breaking point. She whispered that she knew something was wrong at work, that she could feel tension around her, that people were acting strange. She mentioned Ethan's name without looking up. Not accusing, fearful. She said something felt off with him too. She said he'd stopped replying, stopped engaging, stopped everything. She looked at me then, finally understanding the pattern, connecting the dots she'd hoped would stay scattered. She asked if I knew something. I took a slow breath, capped the water bottle, and walked past her toward the stairs. I didn't answer. Some truths don't need to be spoken to be unmistakable. Her collapse didn't come with screaming. It came with the quiet realization that she no longer understood the world she'd built, because it wasn't responding to her anymore. I saw it the next morning when I walked into the kitchen. She was already dressed, hair still damp, wearing the same Nike leggings she once used as her excuse to step out for fresh air. But there was nothing confident about her now. She sat at the table staring at her phone like it was betraying her in real time. I poured coffee without acknowledging her. She finally spoke, voice hoarse, saying something felt wrong at work, that people were treating her differently. She said she caught two coworkers whispering after she walked past. She said her boss barely made eye contact in their morning meeting. She asked if I noticed anything. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She was unraveling without my help. Later that day, I left work early. Not to follow her, just to observe the silence she lived in when she thought no one was watching. When I walked into the house, Hulu was paused on the TV again, the way it had been for days. She wasn't watching anything. She was sitting on the couch staring at her laptop, the Best Buy microphone still beside it, untouched, as if she couldn't bring herself to move it or admit what it represented. Her phone buzzed. She grabbed it instantly, like a drowning hand reaching for a rope. But when she read the screen, her face tightened. Not the expression of someone excited. Someone disappointed. Someone abandoned. Ethan wasn't answering her anymore. She closed the laptop and pressed her palms into her eyes, elbows on her knees, breathing like someone trying not to panic. When she noticed me standing there, she straightened fast, wiping her face, pretending she'd just been thinking deeply about something important. She asked if we could talk later. She said she felt like everything was falling apart at once. She said she couldn't understand why she felt so alone even when I was in the same room. I walked to the fridge, took a bottle of water, and let the silence stretch until she looked away. She wasn't losing her grip because I punished her. She was losing it because she finally felt the weight of everything she'd set in motion, without me lifting a finger. The end didn't arrive as a breakup. It arrived as a reckoning she couldn't outrun. The morning light stretched across the kitchen when I walked in, keys in hand, ready to leave before the day had a chance to pull me back into old patterns. She was sitting at the table, shoulders curled inward, staring at a cold cup from Subway she hadn't touched. Her hair was unbrushed. Her eyes were swollen. She looked like someone who had spent the entire night rehearsing a confession she no longer had the courage to give. When she saw me, something in her posture lifted, hopeful, desperate, terrified. She stood slowly, bracing one hand on the table like the floor might tilt beneath her. She said she couldn't handle the silence anymore. She said she didn't recognize who I'd become. She said the distance felt like punishment she didn't know how to fix. I didn't move toward her. I didn't sit. I didn't soften. I leaned against the counter, the car keys dangling from my fingers, the weight of months settling quietly between us. She stepped closer until she was only a few feet away, still wearing those same Nike leggings, the uniform she once used to slip out of the house with her secrets tucked neatly behind a smile. Now they looked like armor that no longer fit. She said she had made mistakes. She didn't specify. She didn't need to. Her voice trembled around the edges of a truth she finally stopped running from. She said she felt like she'd lost me. I looked at her, not the way a husband looks at his wife, but the way a man looks at the final piece of a puzzle he's already solved. I told her I hadn't walked away first. I'd simply stepped back enough for her choices to echo. She took a breath that collapsed halfway. She asked if we could start over. Not with confidence, with surrender. I walked past her toward the door. She turned as if expecting a final plea, some sign I might still be the man who once begged for closeness she withheld. I opened the door, felt the cold morning air hit my face, and said the only thing left to say. I didn't choose silence to hurt you. I chose it because it's the only language you never learn to respect. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.